Hi, my name's Evan Coling, and I am a recovering coffee snob. It's true. I don't know how it happened. I just know that it did. Well, I'll be honest. I'm pretty sure I know how it happened. There was a time in my life, in my mid-20s, where there was a couple really fancy coffee shops and a couple people that I became friends with who knew so much about coffee. People that would roast their own beans in their house and used instruments and tools and all the things to make coffee that tastes like coffee I had never had before. And I'll be honest, when I realized this and there was new ways to experience coffee beyond Starbucks or Caribou, it was so exciting to realize there's a whole new world out here with coffee that I've never experienced before. And so I learned, and I wanted to have as much of this new coffee world as I could. But I also realized that the same thing that had grown my world in coffee got to a point where it was actually shrinking my experience with coffee. Because I started to become one of these people who got really judgmental about the type of coffee I would drink. I mean, if I wasn't spending $4 or more for a cup of coffee, well then what's the point of it? It must not be worth me drinking. And if I found out that you made coffee just by pushing a button on a machine, I don't know if I can trust your judgment. And if we're out at a diner, there's no way I'm gonna drink coffee that I don't know when it was made, where it was made, how it was made. I'll just take a water, thank you very much. And it was in one of these moments where I realized, what is happening to me? The thing that made coffee so much more fun and bigger for me has now actually shrunk my experience with coffee, but also with other people. Now, I'll be honest, I still need probably 3, 4, 5 different tools to make the coffee that I drink every morning. But I'm also much more gracious with people because the way I like coffee is the way that I like coffee. Sometimes, maybe a lot of times, the things that we call our own, the things that we say, yes, I want this to be a part of my life, these are things that have grown my experience with the world. If we're not careful, they can turn themselves around on us and actually begin to shrink our experience with the world and with other people. We are the church. The Bible is telling us this all across its pages. And the question I want us to think about is, are we using that reality in ways that grows and expands our experience in the world and with other people? Or have we become and gotten to a place where the reality of the fact that we are the church begins to shrink our experience with other people and actually made us more critical and made it harder for us to love other people? See, I'm convinced after spending just about my entire life in church buildings that it's not, buildings don't buildings don't love people. Programs and websites, they don't change people's lives. It's the people in the buildings. It's the people within the events and the programs. It's the people who are creatively working the website as an avenue for connection. It isn't these things, it's the people. We are the church. You are the church. You who've committed yourself to Christ and who have accepted God's gift of grace daily into our life. You are the church. And as we experience God's churchness within us and our obedience and commitment to the truth of Jesus, we should be growing in our capacity to love people in ways that our experience with people grows and gets bigger rather than smaller and harder. Okay, let's get into the text and see what Peter has to say about this. Today we're in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 22, all the way to chapter 2, verse 3. Now, if you're new or not very familiar with the Bible, when I talk about 1 Peter, that's the book within the book that we're going to be reading. And when I say chapter 1, chapters are just the big numbers on the page, verses are the little numbers on the page. So let's start with verse 22 of chapter 1 in 1 Peter. Peter says this, "Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart." Oof, right there from the beginning. There is so much to think about and to talk about. See, last week we talked about how obedience comes from a recognition of gratitude. Obedience at its best comes when we recognize, man, the person that I'm being obedient to, I'm doing this out of a gratefulness, a gratitude for who they are and what they've done in my life. That's when obedience at its best comes to play. So now here, Peter is telling us, now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, there's something about obeying Jesus that makes us more into the people that we were created to be. That process is called sanctification. We become more the people that God created us to be as we obey Jesus in the ways that he leads us and teaches us. And there's two things we need to be aware of in this reality. The first is obedience and following Jesus should actually be changing our lives and changing who we are as a community. It says it right here. Now that you have been purified yourselves by obeying the truth so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart. See, Peter makes this connection for us that says the more obedient we are to Jesus, the better at loving people we should become. The product of obedience to Jesus is our ability to love sincerely and deeply from the heart. That's the product. I think a lot of us, maybe tonight as we're watching this, or this morning as we're watching this, or whenever you're watching this, need to just pause for a second and say, all this stuff that I'm doing for Jesus, is it actually making me more loving? Am I actually becoming more gracious with the people around me? Or am I becoming more critical and judgmental because people aren't doing things and being the way that I am? People aren't necessarily working as hard as I am, or they're working way harder than I am. Is our obedience to the truth giving us the ability to love sincerely and deeply from the heart? I mean, in John 14, verse 6, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." So when Peter is saying that we have purified ourselves by obeying the truth, if you're asking yourself, well, what is the truth? The truth is Jesus. If we want to know what is true, we must learn and know who Jesus is. And if we want to do what is true, we must start doing the things that Jesus does. The more we get to know him, the more grateful we will be for him. And the more grateful that we will be for him will translate in a desire not just to do what he says so I can get a reward, but to be obedient because I'm grateful. And the product of that obedience is that we become more the people that God created us to be so that we can love others sincerely, deeply from the heart. Obedience makes us Obedience to the truth makes us better at relationships, better at justice, better at mission, and better at caring for people. And this is what Peter gets to later in this passage. In chapter 2, verse 1, Peter says, "Therefore, rid yourselves of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good." Oh man, I love that. I love that Peter calls us and shows us that obedience to the truth should produce a sincere love and a deep love from the heart for others in us. That is the way that we should be growing. And he says, therefore, and if you remember from last week, whenever we see that word therefore, we ask ourselves a question. Do you remember what that question is? The question is, what is the therefore? And so when Peter says, therefore, rid yourselves of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind, he's saying, because you are becoming so good at loving others, there is no place for malice, for holding a grudge, for working against other people. There's no room for deceit or hypocrisy, for envy or slander of every kind. Come on, can someone agree with me right now that our world needs less trash talk about other people? We need people who are striving after, even imperfectly striving after the ways of truth so that we can love others. And the more that we grow in love, the less room there's going to be for malice and deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. And I just want to end with this because I think it's important. Peter says, like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk so that you may grow up in your salvation. Growing up in your salvation. This is a crazy phrase, that we can actually grow into our salvation. This is the mystery of it all, is that when I give my life to Jesus, when I say, yes, I'm in, I give you my life, I trust you with my life, and I accept the grace that you gave me, even without me asking for it. In that moment, I'm saved from my sin. I'm saved from my brokenness. I'm saved into a new way of living. But at that moment, I don't know what that means or how to do it. Have you ever felt that way of like, I don't know how to do the things that Jesus is asking me to do? Well, Peter recognizes that here. He says, crave pure spiritual milk. Crave the words of Jesus. Crave the life of Jesus so that we may grow into our salvation. The gift of grace isn't supposed to be something that perfects us right in the moment to a complete and whole person. But it begins a lifelong process of becoming more the person that God created us to be. We are in process. And as we are the church, that means the church is in process. Grow into your salvation. I know you're not perfect. You know you're not perfect. You know I'm not perfect. But let's work towards truth together. Let's grow into our salvation together. You have been given a new life, one that is free from the oppressive weight of trying to create or uphold your own popularity, your own image, your own sense of identity, because now God has given you one that will far outlast you. God has given you an eternal identity that begins now, and that is true that you are His and you are the church. Let's grow into that together. Buildings and programs and events by themselves don't change lives or bring justice or redeem hearts. It is the work of God through people who are the church. We use buildings, we use offices, we use programs, we use home groups so that we can grow into our salvation and bring others into the reality of God's love with us. And so this week, let's focus on Jesus. Let's ask our questions. Let's figure this out. Let's practice doing the things of Jesus together. Let's trust him and obey the truth, obey Jesus, so that we can grow to be the church who is set apart for the good of all, not just the good of me. May we be people who, the more that we learn about Jesus, the better we become at being the church. It actually grows our experience of hospitality, where now I can make such a good cup of coffee for somebody. I can use the things I know to bless others, where I used to judge others and hold it against them. May our experience with God's love be the gift that we give to other people. The process that we are as the church, welcome other people, not hold it against them or keep people out. I'm praying for you this week that we can all be obedient to the truth of Jesus, grow in our experience of love, and be the church. God bless you. We love you. Let me pray and then we'll finish up. God, thank you so much for who you are. Thank you that you trust us with the gift of the good news to the world. But Father, tonight in this space, I pray that we would better understand what that gift means for us, that we would better trust you to be the truth and be the reality of love and salvation for us, that we may grow into that as we've already experienced it. Thank you for who you are. We love you and we pray this in your Son's name. Amen.
Farther